Just once.
Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Mayor of the City of Clarence, Councillor Brendan Blomley.
Well, hello, welcome all. Before proceeding, I pay my respects to the Murrumbidgee people as the traditional and original custodians of the lands on which we meet, and I acknowledge the continuing connection of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people to the skies, land and waterways. I pay respect to elders past and present. Before we commence with tonight's council meeting, please let us all pause for a quiet moment of reflection and respect. Thank you, councillors. Please be seated. Well, good evening and welcome to the Clarence City Council meeting of Monday, the 7th of August 2023. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, and what is said in this meeting is not protected by privilege, and there is a link to the agenda papers on Council's website. Item number 2, apologies. We have a full house, so there are none. Item number 3, declarations of interest of councillors or close associates. Are there any declarations from councillors? There being none, we now head on into our omnibus items. Item number 4, confirmation of the minutes. The minutes of the council meeting held on the 17th of July 2023 have been circulated. Are there any issues arising? There being none, we move now on to Mayor's communication, and my diary entries from the 18th of July through to the 7th of August have been circulated, along with the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Alison Ritchie, and Councillor Wendy Kennedy, representing me at different events in the city. Moving now on to council workshops, 4.3, as listed in the agenda. 4.4, tabling of petitions. CEO, are there any petitions?
No, Mayor.
Thank you. Moving now on to 4.5, reports from outside bodies. Copying Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority. Councillor Walker?
Not at this point of the agenda.
Thank you. And you'll note too, colleagues, that we now have the Southern Tasmanian Regional Waste Authority, which is a new addition to our reports. The authority's quarterly report to 30th of June 2023 is attached to the agenda. Councillor Warren, would you like to say anything on this item, please?
Thank you. It is early days. Most of the time and effort so far has gone into setting up the authority, but it was very exciting to attend the first meeting with representatives from the 12 Southern Councils, and I have great confidence that we can work together to build solutions on good scale and economy to solve the southern waste problems. So, or to treat waste as a resource rather than a problem, I should say. So I encourage people to keep an eye out for the next report when there should be more to report on.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Warren. There's nothing to report on either TasBorder or the Greater Hobart Committee. Colleagues, are there any other reports from Council and special committees and other representative bodies? Councillor Chong, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I table the June Richmond Advisory Committee meeting?
Thank you. Yes, you certainly may. Thank you very much. Are there any other reports? There being none, moving now on to 4.6, the weekly briefing reports. The weekly briefing reports of the 17th, 24th and the 31st of July 2023 have been circulated to councillors. Are there any matters arising? Councillor James.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I refer to, excuse me, the 17th of July 2023 and to the Sports Facilities Strategic Plan. I refer to page 6 in as much as it refers to sports included in the plan, and the secondary sports are tennis, lawn bowls, croquet, little athletics, touchball, football and netball. Mr Mayor, could you please advise as to what is the state of play in relation to the Rosny Bowls Club? And this has also been referred to as, for secondary sports, either share or impact on primary sports facilities. Be advised in relation to the current situation on the viability of the lawn bowls at Rosny Park. Thanks.
Thank you for the question, Councillor James. So, you or Mr Graham to answer that one, please.
I think we might take that on notice. I need to check previous minutes as to whether any of those issues were confidential or not.
Councillor James, we'll come back to you in writing on that one. Thank you for the question. A second question?
Yes, the other one is in relation to the 24th of July, the Cambridge Road and Percy Street stormwater upgrade. There have been substantial delays in this, and that's on page 7 of the attachment. It says, amongst other things, that the commencement date of the 7th of August for the same crew to undertake the stormwater upgrade project. Mr Mayor, is that on time, and is there a likely finalisation of when those works will be completed? It has been an ongoing concern for this council, so I'd like to be advised, and I'm sure my colleagues would like to be advised as to whether or not commencement has started, and B, as to whether or not the actual timeline will be met on the expectation of the time. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor James. Noting that today is the 7th of August, Mr Graham, could you provide an answer?
Yeah, well, through you, Mr Mayor, I understand they're supposed to commence today, and they'll be my first stop after tonight's meeting to have a look. They are due to be finished before December this year, and we'll keep council informed on their progress.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor James, any other questions? Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I refer to the briefing points, the weekly briefing noted, dated the 26th of July 2023, and I might say that it relates to the annual reseal program, asphalt resurfacing works and those sorts of things, and I commend the council on the fact that these resealing works are done on the basis of the other thing. My question also relates, my question actually relates to an ancillary matter, which is we have all these programs and all these processes dealing with our roads, and in the time that I've been on council, can I say that the majority of complaints have actually been about footpaths. Is there any similar program about resealing and reconstructing our footpaths, which across the city really are in urgent need of much attention? It's about time we worried about people as well as footpaths.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Mulder, and you'd be aware that I understand it was last year that the survey was done, but Mr Graham, you might like to provide a more detailed answer, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor, Council, I believe, awarded about $1.25 million for footpath rectification works, and has annually for well over my 16 years in being with Council. We've recently just received the results of the last audit. They're done every 3 to 4 years. Part of the program is the audit identifies which footpaths don't meet our standards and therefore a high risk of needing repair. We undertake them on a suburb by suburb process. We spend about 3 months in a suburb and attack the highest risk repairs that need to be done. And so it's about a 3-year program that we roll attending one suburb at a time.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Mulder.
Second question, Mr Mayor, relates to the omnibus item relating to your diary entries. Can I just ask for the interests of transparency, that not only do we get a notification of who you met with, but some idea of the agenda and, if possible, the outcomes. And I noticed that you've done that in relation to the meeting with the Premier and Minister Barnett over the Kangaroo Bay Point developments, but the rest of it we've got no idea.
Oh, thank you. As you know, Councillor Mulder, this is provided as a courtesy to colleagues. If any colleagues wish to ask me what meetings are about, they're very welcome to do so in the appropriate forum or indeed at any time. I've got nothing to hide. That's why they're publicly available. Any other questions, colleagues, for the weekly briefing reports? All right. I note we're at the end of omnibus items. Can I have a mover of the omnibus? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Seconder, Councillor Hunter. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Councillor Mulder, you...
Sorry,
yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. All right. Moving now on to item number 5, public question time. As we commence public question time, I'd like to remind everyone of the meeting procedures as they relate to questions. Public question time provides opportunity for people to ask questions about council's activities, not make statements. Anyone wishing to address council make a statement may do so under the deputation section of the council meeting agenda. As chairperson, I may refuse to accept a question, and if I do, I will provide reasons for that. Equally, I may indicate that I will take a question on notice. A copy of the procedures for public question time can be found on Council's website or by request from the Council officers. A link is also provided in the agenda, as most people would be aware. So public questions on notice, there are none. Answers to questions on notice, there are none. Answers to previous questions taken on notice. There's an answer to a question from Mr Bradley Walker from the 17th of July. CEO, would you like to?
Thank you. That answer is contained within the agenda, and I propose that we take that as read.
Thank you very much. And also Mr Victor Marsh's question, 17th of July, is also listed in the agenda as well. We now move on to 5.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the gallery? Thank you, Mrs Marsh. Mrs Marsh, if I could ask you please just to talk into the microphone, please, for the people at home. Thank you.
My name is Joanne Marsh and I live in Belrive. The answer to my question on the 26th of June about the completion of the Belrive Beach Park Master Plan taken on notice was published in the agenda for July 17. Who provided the answer to my question, please?
CEO.
I think
Mr Graham, if you could please...
It would have come through the asset management group and providing that answer.
Thank you, Mr Graham.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Marsh. Mr Figg.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Michael Figg, Lauderdale. I've got a question about council workshops. I've been a ratepayer for 40 years here, and I've only been allowed to enter one workshop as a part of a group. The information given to us is after the event, and yet there's nothing that tells us what happened in the event of council workshops. Could you just explain to the mere local as myself issues like which affect us, the development of low-lying areas? The reason behind that question is because some of the standard information that we're directed to as members of the public is the list, for example. And the list over the 40 years that I've been here, and I don't know how many years the list has been active, is inaccurate. And
Mr Figg, I'm sorry, I will have to ask you just... You've
to
asked
get to the question, yeah.
Thank you. That's becoming more of a deputation now. I have to enforce this rule across the board with everyone.
Sorry, what's the ruling?
So I outline what public question time is about, Mr Figg. It's not a long preamble. You actually just jump up, you ask a question. We will then either provide the answer to your question or we'll seek more information from you outside of this forum. Okay. It's not for you to make public statements, which is what you're now doing.
No, I was backing why I would ask this question. The question is, do we get any will we get any pre-notification of items like the low-lying areas which affect us, so that we could put a petition forward or a representation forward at that meeting? And can we have information, if we're not there, on what happened in that meeting?
Yeah, Mr Figg, thank you for your question. I'll ask the CEO to answer that in a moment, but the important thing is that workshops are for the information of elected members, so for the staff to provide elected members with briefings. So, CEO, if you could please take a seat, Mr Figg. Thank you. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. That's exactly the information I was going to provide. The workshop environment is primarily focused on council staff briefing councillors about particular issues in a private setting, or taking a presentation from an external body or person on a particular topic. They're for information, they're not a decision-making body, so it's an information session.
And Mr Figg, can I also just say too, for full transparency, that's why people are told what has been discussed in workshops. And for the particular workshop that you reference, there's nothing to stop you, of course, as you often do, reach out to me and other elected members to put your position as well. And other elected members, I know from time to time, reach out to you to sort of, for want of a better term, sanity check what they may have been told from other quarters. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Figg. Are there any other questions, public questions at all? Okay. Are there any deputations by members of the public, Chief Executive Officer?
Thank you, Mayor. No, there are no deputations tonight.
All right, thank you. We now move on to item number 7, which is Planning Authority matters. And I advise that Council now intends to act as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. First item is 7.1, which is a development application at 145 and 163 Pass Road at 46A Angelina Drive, Rokeby, amendment to the Parenville Specific Area Plan. I'll call for a mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Kennedy.
Oh, no, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just have outlined the community consultation. That's what this is about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is quite an interesting one. There's obviously a long history with this site that's been going for a number of years, and there's been several changes since it all began. I've read this report multiple times trying to really understand the depth and complexity of it. I'm still not convinced I fully grasp what has gone on. However, I realise this is just about going out to community engagement, which I feel is very important. Unfortunately, the people who should be engaged most with about this plan aren't there yet. So I would ask and hope that we would specifically go to anyone who has bought property in the vicinity already, as their voice matters the most. I'm particularly interested in the open space framework that was one of the attachments, and I thank the council officers for requesting that to be undertaken, which was only completed in March of this year. It's not really clear what the responses from the developers are in that document, which is listed on page 37 to 39, which I would like to be followed up, and hope that we might have a council workshop on this item when it comes back from community engagement.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Mulder, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I thank Councillor Hunter because she's picked up some of the very issues. I think this is the third time that I've been on council, and there may have been others in my absence, where there's been a rearranging of the stages. And if I'm not mistaken, each time it's deferring the stage about the public open space so they can build some more houses, and then they'll come back to the open space at some time down the track. Now, seriously, are we going to end up with a subdivision where we have multiple stages and we keep reshuffling the order so that the public open space, which is required, would I suggest, the time the first house is built, not the last, right, is actually pushed off and off and off into the never never, and maybe doesn't happen at all? Because that would be a complete abrogation of our responsibility as a council to keep doing it. When this application was first approved, and it may have been before I was on council the first time, it was quite clear that we wanted to give the developer a stage or two to enable to get a return on the investment so that we could build the public open space, which would then become an asset for the rest of it. Now, this is only going out to public consultation, but the alarm bells are ringing with me as to whether we're ever going to get the much needed and valuable open space that this particular development will deliver, or should deliver. My other question relates to the headworks charges, and there's a reference in this to $1 million odd. How easy that flows off the tongue if you don't have to pay it, for the roadworks. And I've got an issue. My question really relates to, is this about the connections, because I think they already exist, or what is this about? Is this about a contribution towards the council, the Pass Road, the $6 million plus we're going to be borrowing to build this road? If this developer has to put $1 million into that, doesn't that actually cut it back to $5 million that we have to bury, to borrow? Bury is probably a better word. And then you've got the issue of the subsequent people. There are people that we are compulsory going to acquire land from. There are other developers down the track who have, who are busy trying to lobby us in relation to their developments. Will they also have to build and pay these sorts of developments. And I'm just a bit interested in what's the protocol for assessing how much contribution to the roadworks is required of developers as they move on with these developments, because Pass Road is actually a service road to all the houses that are being built in this area. And for so often I've heard the comment that, this is going to be a city in its own right. 20,000 residents are likely to be there in the next decade. Well, if 20,000 residents are likely to be in the decade, and there's half a dozen developers who are going to be producing all that money, I would start to question as to whether we should be borrowing money to build Pass Road at all. So I will support this going out to consultation, but I would like some addressing of these issues, and there too. How are you assessing your headworks charges, and are they adequate and are they appropriate? And the second point is, really relates to, I'd like a commitment from council that this is the last time we will recommend the pushing over of the important public recreation space in order to build more houses. Sooner or later, we're going to have to get our pound of flesh, and my fear is we may never do so and end up with another cost to the ratepayers that should have been borne by developers who are creating a city in their own right.
Any other speakers? Well, Councillor James, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and it's interesting that Councillor Moulder raised that very matter in relation to the headworks and also to the desirability of the impact that the development will have on Pass Road and also further acquisitions along that stretch of road. The simple fact of the matter is that this has a checkered history, and it goes back many years, and may I say that their first endeavour, I was in this place at that time when it was to be an enclave. It was to be a guarded sort of environment where there would be a teaching school, there would be some development, but primarily the development would be for those people that had a vested interest in this particular development. And subsequent to that, it has changed over the years, and there's been many changes and amendments made to this. The point I'm trying to make here is that the development needs to go ahead, but at the same time, and I raised a question on Friday at the briefing, and that was that how are we going to sell this to the public in as much as is it going to be a broad brush sort of 4-page dossier that will go out to the community in order to seek their consultation? Or would it be some synopsis of those key points, which in fact would be able to be understood by the lowest common denominator, with respect? And therefore, how are we going to do that? This is a huge development, and as was mentioned earlier, Council has approved $6 million in the budget. We borrowed the money to build and actually construct the Pass Road, and that by the very nature means that there needs to be, as far as wide, to those properties that may be, or section or part of their land to be compulsory acquired as part of the development of and the upgrade of Pass Road. So really my question is to the appropriate officer, how are we going to sell this? Are we going to deliver a large piece of paperwork, which by the very nature it doesn't really describe what is being proposed? Or is it going to be in a short, concise and understood paper that the people, not only the developers, which would be in support of because it's going to directly impact upon them, but also on those other property owners that actually will be affected as part of the contribution that Parranville will have to make as part of their arrangement for $1 million, as I understand it, for the headworks or construction of that road abutting their property. So in conclusion, may I pose the question, how are we going to sell this? Are we going to make it as clear and simple, or are we going to sort of hoodwink, or not, that's probably not the right word, but...
Just be careful with the way of terminology, please, Councillor James.
I beg your pardon?
Be careful with the terminology. Council's not in the business of hoodwinking anyone. Yeah, okay. So again, just watch your language, please, in this place.
I can't really see a problem with that, but anyway, if you think it is...
Well, the chair has a problem with it.
Okay.
So there's a problem with it, Councillor James.
Look, I retract it. I retract.
Good.
Hoodwink, whatever. So, can I have an answer? May I have an answer to my question, please?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. The report sets out that consultation will occur in accordance with our community engagement policy, and will be for a 28-day period, which will operate through the Your Say site that we ordinarily use for feedback. And then at the conclusion of that period, that will be returned to Council for a decision. My expectation would be that we'll have a workshop on it. I will make a comment, though, that it is not for Council to sell this change. We are simply providing information for people in order to receive their views about the merits of that particular proposal to change the staging.
Councillor James, you wish to say anything else? You've got a minute 29 to go.
Just briefly, I would thank the General Manager for his comments, excuse me, and I just hope it is able to be delivered in a very simple and concise amount of paperwork or part of our communications story. So I thank the General Manager for his comments.
Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. This is an interesting one, as colleagues have spoken about the history, the checkered history, I think, was mentioned, and the long-running history. I think all of those things are fair comments to make, and what I'm seeing tonight is people essentially red flagging the sorts of things that they're going to be interested in examining when we get to the next phase. What we're simply doing here tonight is supporting a motion to go out to consultation, which I would point out Council's not obliged to do from a statutory point of view. So I'm really pleased to see that actually Council is electing to go out to consult, particularly those who've seen my position in relation to consultation about Pass Road and other matters connected to this area. So I'm going to be supporting the motion on that basis. I think it is valuable to start to hear what colleagues are thinking around what we may be presented with down the track, but we need to remember what it is that we're actually supporting this evening, which is simply to go out to community consultation. So I'll be supporting it on that basis, but also looking forward to very closely examining what we get moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Being none, right of reply, Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you for colleagues for your contribution. It was very valuable. We discussed it on Friday. There was an opportunity to make some amendments, but I feel, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your contribution as well there. I feel comforted in the fact that we're going back out to consultation. This is the time that we can try our very best to make sure that everyone that has some concerns put them forward, and I also take great comfort that it will come back to us again. So I seek Council's support in moving this forward.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Colleagues, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Council now concludes its deliberations as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning Approvals Act of 1993. We move on to item number 8 of the agenda. 8.1, there's nothing there. 8.2, which is asset management, amendment to the 2023-24 active recreation budget for 271 East Derwent Highway, Gilson Bay fencing. I'll call for a mover, please, of this recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Chong, a seconder. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Very briefly, I think we've all seen the devastation that's happened on this oval and how distraught the young football players have been when it's happened. Moving money to help put a fence around this to prevent that happening seems an absolutely sensible thing to do.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Supporting the motion, but obviously not happy to be here, standing here, to spend money on things that we shouldn't have to because of repeated vandalism. I'm a little bit surprised that it's taken us this long to actually address it, given the history. If we go back, we've been seeing some damage since June 2002, 2 instances, and then of course again in 2003, putting out hundreds of particularly children in relation to accessing their sport and recreational activities. So it's disappointing to be having to redirect. Obviously, we don't. From the briefing we've been provided, it shouldn't impact on the other project. Hopefully that will remain the case. So happy to support it on that basis.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Walker, please.
Yeah, look, the motion is as disappointing as it is prudent. It is just the situation that we find ourselves in. This is an interesting oval in as much as it is one of the ovals where we've worked in collaboration with the Education Department. It's a really sensible and rational use of scarce grounds. And I commend the council crew for how they did the workarounds when faced with the situation of this ground being unavailable for use due to vandalism. I think that the southern, the young soccer that occurs here is really run well, and this will ensure that we'll be able to do so for longer. So we are where we are, and I urge colleagues to support it.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, who couldn't support this this kind of development? Speaking from a former career, yes, this is crime prevention stuff at its best, but the best crime prevention, and this is where we don't do anything, is in the social crime prevention stage. What are we doing out there about this sort of behaviour? Now, we can talk about fences deterring it. No, that's not a deterrence, that's a prevention. A deterrence would be if, as in my last council meeting, I tried to get us to grapple seriously with all these assets. It's one thing to be standing up there with photo pictures in the media about how terrible this behaviour is and wheelies and all the rest of it, yet we had the opportunity, and we have bucked it every time, to invest in things like CCTV programs, which actually get these areas. We know they're being targeted, we know they're going to get hit, yet we don't do anything about deterring behaviour, and the best method of deterrence is detection. And that's where I think as a council we are failing. And if we don't, we can build fences, but if we, so we build a nice big fence and someone comes along with a big four-wheel drive, crashes through the fence and goes and churns up the highway again. And what have we got? Zero evidence with which to detect and prosecute those offenders and deter future behaviour. So please, if we're in this space, for the cost of a fence, we could also be putting in some CCTV, which will protect that fence, make sure we don't have to build another one.
Councillor Goyne, please.
Just following on from Councillor Mulder's comments, I'd actually rather see possible channeling of funds to channel behaviours into more positive outcomes, more open use of racetracks and places for people to use their motorbikes and four-wheel drives rather than just, we'll always have people doing wheelies and burnouts. I'm sure Councillor Mulder probably did them when he was younger too.
Mr Mayor, I'm being egregiously misrepresented here without any evidence whatsoever. I demand an immediate retraction and an apology for the grievous offence that's been caused.
I'll blow my brain for that comment.
I didn't hear anything else you say. Please continue.
And I would certainly like to, yes, whilst I do agree that CCTV is much better than spending the money on fences, it would be nice to channel our youth's pursuits into safer ways of managing behaviours. So.
Thank you, Councillor Gourmet. There being no other colleagues, Councillor Chong, why reply?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, colleagues, for your varied responses. And I seek your support in this particular resolution.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Colleagues, I'll put the motion, which is the recommendation. All those in favour? That's unanimous again. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item 8.4.1, which is authorisation under the Local Government Act of 1993. There's a recommendation in front of us. I'll call for a mover, please. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Mulder. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think this is pretty straightforward, so I won't spend too much time speaking to this particular recommendation. We've spoken about this at workshop. It's, I don't think, an unreasonable request. I am reliably informed that such delegation exists at other councils. It's balanced. I'm satisfied with the reporting requirements, both for council and for public viewing. So on that basis, I'm quite comfortable to seek the support of colleagues to support this particular motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, likewise, I think this is an administrative matter, and I notice that all we're doing is not changing the capacity to do this, but changing the capacity to require it to be voted on by council at a meeting in the 3 weeks. I'm not too sure that I can think of too many urgency situations where we couldn't go through that process, but it is an appropriate delegation. Remember, this is $250,000. And it doesn't deal with the overall appropriation. It's about shuffling money between particular votes that council's already approved. And we all know that in this environment, I suspect there's going to be many a project which we've under-budgeted, under-financed, and therefore we need to move money aside, and it will be at the expense of some other project that may or may not go ahead as required. I also just like to raise the point that $250,000, it's a lot of money to you and me as individuals. It certainly would deal with my household budget greatly if I was able to even have that money, let alone be able to switch it around as to whether I paid it to my wife or spent it myself. But it is in the scheme of things, in the size of the corporation and the size of the services, an appropriate thing to do, with the transparency and accountability being in the form of a local briefing report. My only concern, and I say this desperately with tongue in cheek, is that I don't want the CEO shifting $250,000 into his salary item line account, but I'm sure that won't happen, and neither would it be possible. But anyway, and the light amount, it's an appropriate thing, but it also needs to be in the context of things that we're going to be discussing a little later on in the evening. You know, and the cost of something like community consultation. And when we get the figures for those sorts of things, we just need to put it that $40,000 to consult our community compared to $250,000 switching funds around, it ain't a big spend, guys.
Councillor James.
Mr Mayor, and I think the Deputy Mayor and also Councillor Mulder have missed the point in this whole process of what they've said so far, and let's be very careful about this. What it's saying is that, in accordance with the section of the Act, it authorises the Chief Executive Officer to make minor adjustments to individual items within an estimate of up to $250,000. So he, as long as the $250 is not exceeded, and it's basically can be distributed to any particular vote within the budget, then that rests with him. That gives him the authority, if this motion is passed, to be able to use those funds in a manner in which he believes is appropriate within that $250,000. But what's interesting is Part B requires the Chief Executive Officer to report any adjustment, including explanation, to be tabled at the first ordinary meeting of council after the adjustment is made. So the deed is done. Are we able to revoke that if we believe in the discussions that $250,000 has been redirected to another area in which the Chief Executive Officer wants and deems it appropriate? It still goes on to say here that any budget changes over $250 for a single item will continue to be presented to council for approval. Over $250,000, but under less than, it's at the discretion of the Chief Executive Officer to make that decision. And at the end of the day, at the end of the day, it's going to be recorded in the weekly briefing report as a fait accompli, in my opinion. So how are we able to sort of agree to that after the die is cast, if you want to use that term? So look, be very, very careful with this sort of thing. Already we're looking at probably changes to the planning of what councils will be able to decide upon if the Liberal government decides on proceeding with that particular process. And if you're going to allow the Chief Executive Officer to make the decision on ratepayers' funds up to 250 to direct it into whatever area he believes is appropriate, then already we are starting to lose control, in my opinion, of not only the council's planning position, which is under consideration, but also about what we can decide upon up to 250,000. So look, I can't support this. It will require a majority, but if you decide to take this on and agree to it, then you'll have no, in my opinion, have no say on what the 250 is being used for, even after the budget has been approved and that money has been obviously dropped into the budget. But after the event, it's then the decision of the General Manager to decide on how that money is spent. And it could be spent on additional wages. I'm not saying it would be or should be, but it could be. And therefore you have that dilemma that we do not have a say on 250,000, which for all intents and purposes was listed in the budget and be part of the funding for the capital works or for other projects within the system. I urge you, please consider this very carefully, because if at the end of the day you agree to this, then you have no say over 250,000, which by the good intentions of everybody around this table at budget time had sort of indicated that they had a project that they liked or wanted to support. But at the end of the day, the 250,000 is at the whim of the General Manager or Chief Executive Officer. I seek my colleagues to consider this very, very carefully.
Thank you, Councillor James. Before I call another speaker, I'd just like to, I think it's important that I clarify a couple of points for those in the gallery and viewing from home, and that is that the Chief Executive Officer's current limit in Council's procurement procedure is $250,000. This change that is being proposed tonight will provide more transparency for councillors, as the current process, as we know, is ad hoc, with budget adjustments noted either through council decisions or through the quarterly report. Any budget changes over $250,000 to an existing single item will continue to be presented to council for approval, and any new budget item above $50,000 will also be presented to council for approval. So I just think it's important that those points be clarified. And Councillor Walker, I'm sorry if I've stolen your thunder, but I'll call on you now to make your contribution, please.
I can still find some wind. Look, thank you for the clarification, and I think it is important to point out that this is an improvement and an add-on, and one of the points with that is, with that extra clarity, were concerns to arise. This is a question. My understanding is that should concerns arise in that, then it would take nothing more than a notice of motion and an absolute majority to knock that right back to a way smaller number. Can I have clarification on that?
Clarification, Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that's certainly one way to deal with it. The other way would be to raise the issue with me and I'd address it.
That's right. So this is a improvement measure to add to a more comfortable process. And furthermore, in any case with any of these numbers, it'll only be a matter for the General Manager if we decide to vote for budgets.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Deputy Mayor, right of reply, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you, colleagues, for your contributions. I would like to say that it's not unusual for operational staff to be provided with such delegations. They already exist in other councils. As we know, it's already actually been happening here. This is a improvement on the process. And I have to say, in another role, in another place, I do this very thing in my day job. I expend and then I'm accountable. Now, if, for example, my board don't like that, then they rein that in. And that's exactly what we would do here, would have done in the past, and we would continue to do in the future. That is our role, to be oversighting what the council staff do, but providing the sufficient tools for people to be able to do their jobs effectively. And it's a really important relationship that a board, in this case council, has with its staff to provide the appropriate tools and have that relationship to enable those roles to work effectively. And I have no concern whatsoever that the appropriate oversights are not here. The delegation, if we felt it wasn't working properly, can be entirely removed by the council. So I don't see why there is any concern whatsoever about this particular proposal, and in fact it's an improvement, as Councillor Walker has indicated, and Councillor Mulder also indicating this is a very sensible proposal. I think it is, and I encourage councillors to support it.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And colleagues, as we're aware and as pointed out by Councillor James, a decision under section 82(6) requires an absolute majority of council. So I'll put the motion, which is the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. That's so carried. Moving now, colleagues, on to 8.4.2, the Future of Local Government Review, Stage 2 Interim Report, Council Submission. Call for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Hunter. And her seconder, Deputy Mayor. Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Local government review. A lot going on in this space, as we all know. I'm quite comfortable with the submission that we've made. We all have various views on this topic, but I think they've covered it rather succinctly. Particularly, I like the way it's highlighted on page 13 of the report. Without qualified assistance to undertake a proper assessment, it is impossible to determine a preferred scenario that is conclusively sustainable and beneficial to the communities captured by the relevant scenarios. Nothing's perfect at this stage. We don't really have enough data to make an informed decision, which is basically what this is spelling out. So we're happy to continue with the status quo, worst case scenario, but we'd like further information in the next report and then go from there. I seek your support.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to thank the CEO and the council staff that have worked hard in putting together the council submission in response to Stage 2 interim report released by the Local Government Review Board. The state government indicated that the review has been about creating a more robust and capable system of local government that's ready for the challenges and opportunities of the future. And while I think there have been some positive aspects around the operation of the local government sector that have been discussed as part of the review process so far, unfortunately, I think that the review has been overshadowed by concerns relating to the possibility of forced amalgamations or boundary adjustments, I think they were referring to them, by the review board, and the further erosion or complete removal, the possibility of those things in relation to council's continuing planning authorities. Recently, we saw Premier Rockcliffe commit that no councils in Tasmania will be forced to amalgamate, and while I think this may not have been exactly what the review board would have liked to hear, I have no doubt that this was a very welcome announcement for local communities. Very regrettably, in my view, this was very shortly followed by an announcement that the state government intends to introduce legislation that gives developers the option to bypass local councils as the decision maker on planning applications. After removing planning from the local government review process, this was deeply concerning, but sadly not unexpected, and it's a policy position that I think weakens the integrity of our planning system and undermines the democratic input that currently takes place, even though that's not quite where I'd like it to be. But as far as I can see, that proposal will act to skew planning in favour of developers and continue to minimise the ability for individual and community voices to be heard in our planning system, something we should be seeking to restore, not continue to erode. The lessons evidenced interstate about forced council mergers and the poor outcomes that were delivered as a result of those have been important lessons. And there's a need for councils to, I believe, retain the role of a planning authority, which I think is widely seen as critical in terms of the independence and providing genuine community input into the process. On a broader level, I think the submission submitted by the Clarence City Council achieves all that is needed at this juncture in terms of the review process. The submission identifies the difficulties in establishing new local government catchment areas that are able to achieve economies of scale, equity, local responsiveness, access, accountability, and details the challenges of long-term sustainability for all councils. The submission appropriately provides no definitive positions at this time and clearly articulates why this is the case, noting the lack of detail and data and analysis and all of those things that are relevant at this stage. And we've also reserved in the submission the right to make further comment and engage and undertake any of those necessary inputs following the issue of stage 3 of the report. So there's no doubt that undertaking the local government review is a very difficult task, but given the potential impacts on communities, the significance of the project can't be underestimated. Given the state government's preemptive announcements on council amalgamations and the role of councils as a planning authority, how effective the local government review process can be and what it will seek to achieve now moving forward remains a bit unclear for me personally. Well, I think with the battle around planning to be fought elsewhere, I hope that the remainder of the local government review process will see a focus that is less about maps and boundaries and more about KPIs, establishing standards around service delivery and how best to achieve them working with local communities. So on that basis, I'm supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Mulder.
Mayor, I have great trouble endorsing a report that purports to represent a position of council which isn't a position. I'd be much more comfortable if it was noted. I could note the report, but we've said from day one with this particular review, as we've done our workshops, as we've discussed these things, there's no way that you're going to get us to come to a consensus view about which particular model of council that's done. And the state government's moved and preempted this report. After we'd worked out our submissions, after we'd worked out all these things, the state government comes and says it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen unless we as individual councils say we want it to happen, and then we go out to the people. And Mr Mayor, as you quite rightly pointed out on Friday, it's the wrong way round. We're a democracy. We're supposed to be asking the people what we want, not giving these particular views. We've all had tons of time to deal with this. I'll just go very briefly on now. I could note this submission because I think it is sort of a collective mix-all of what we can agree with some of it, but not all of it. I just have trouble with endorsing it. Because if I endorse it, if this council endorse it, it suggests that we all hold this opinion, and clearly we don't. So for a minor change, and I request, and at this stage I think I'll suggest that I'll request the mover and the seconder to simply change the word from endorse to notes, and then I would be happy with that.
Yeah, is that, well, that then becomes the motion that we're, sorry, you're changing endorses with what, Councillor Mulder? What are you proposing?
Notes.
Notes.
The council notes the submission.
Councillor Hunt, are you happy with that?
Yes, I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
I don't have any particular concern about it, Mr Mayor, only to ensure that there's no particular technical difficulty with changing that, so otherwise no problem.
Colleagues, that now becomes the motion for us, that is that Council notes the submission and everything else as it is in front of us. Thank you, Councillor Mulder.
Thank you. So continuing on that now, and the only thing I can say, and why I put notes, is that in the report, on page 1, it says, in our view, allegedly council's view, and I don't agree with this at all, the recommendation must demonstrably enhance our current circumstances as they relate to sustainability, service delivery, local representation, and consequently not diminishing it. What a selfish approach to reform of the local government sector. Sorry, it doesn't suit us. Just let the other ones, let Sorrel, let the others who don't have the rates, the database, who also share a community of interest but happen to be outside our boundaries, let them hang. Who cares about them? As long as we're okay. Well, the last time I checked, there might be 29 of us, but we're all in this together, and we're all in the same game, we're all playing by the same rules, and we're all trying to deliver the same services to all our people. Yes, it will be a detriment to our particular ratepayers, but the sum of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And it's that sort of approach we need to use. How can you justify 29 separate councils, 29 separate IT systems, 29 separate HR departments where we're running around competing with everything, 29, general managers, with due respect, 29 everything. Yet all we are is a glorified department of the government, as the planning scheme so often tells us. Do we have 29 police commissioners, 29 health CEOs, 29 health department systems? No, we don't. The administrative overheads in bringing back these councils is so great. You know, and the fact that we happen to be a financially sustainable thing is not in the interests of Tasmanians, because other councils have to come up to that board. And yes, there'll be job losses, as I've said before, but there'll probably be job increases at the local service delivery level, and isn't that what we're all about? So I'm happy to endorse this now that it's noted, but I certainly do not endorse a report because it cannot possibly contain a collective view. Thank you.
Before we proceed, just a couple of points, Councillor Mulder. I'd appreciate not being verbaled in this chamber as what I may or may not have said in a workshop or an agenda briefing. That's not appropriate to be doing that. The second point I'd like to make too, for full transparency for people watching at home and the Clarence community, is that a great deal of work, as the Deputy Mayor pointed out, as well as the mover of the motion, has gone into this report by the CEO and his team. There have been many opportunities for elected members to provide feedback. Feedback was provided by myself and one other councillor. Everyone in this chamber has had an opportunity to provide feedback to this submission. This submission, as we're told, was submitted on the 28th of July as per the timeframe set out by the board. And last Friday, the CEO and I met with the Honourable Sue Smith, the Chair and members of the board, to present our submission. So pretty tight timeframes, and the point made that we won't always agree is a correct point to make, but there have been multiple opportunities for feedback to be provided. And I thank that other colleague for her input as well, but just make the point that everyone had equal opportunity to provide input. So any other speakers on this motion, please? Councillor Walker, thank you.
Yes, thank you. The previous submission I did extensively make commentary around, and I didn't submit feedback on this because an extensive amount of work had gone into it. It was robust. It struck where this council was, not me. It was a little bit soft on outsourcing for my liking, and it could have gone a little bit harder on some of the accountability measures and performance management and benchmarking, etc. But this is striking the right balance. And it isn't a put up the portcullis and, man the barricades report at all. It is simply saying a case for change has to be made, point one. Point two, a range of scenarios, we've looked at them and would need some serious more drilling and data to be able to comment in all honesty. That's a grown-up response, and it's also a response that a lot of detail and work went into it. So I'm endorsing it. I'm not going to vote against the motion. I'm not going to unnote it. I will be supporting it. And I think Clarence has tended to be very grown up around this process. In 2014, we ended up in two processes because we were very open. Our process then was if you could drive or walk to a municipality without crossing through another one, we would be willing and open to engage in consultations around mergers. Both Southern Midlands and Brighton weren't interested in pursuing that, but to a variety of degree the other ones did, and we went through a process, an extensive process, and that was then followed by a survey of consultation and a detailed survey. And I don't know that any other council went to that length. So I mean, I think that should be noted. Yes, we are voting on this even though it's already gone in, but that was the nature of the timing, and I don't think there was another way around it, and I think that the approach taken by the GM was pragmatic and appropriate. So this isn't my report, but I'm happy, I think it happily strikes the balance of where things are. There's a lot more to be done in that space, and it's going to be interesting now that the state government has made the rulings they've made on no force amalgamations. So I guess the concentration will be around those other measures. And as far as different councils having different strengths, you may think that moral hazard doesn't matter. I think it does. I think if councils have been hitting their ratepayers for more than other ones because they've been grown-ups and have been looking at what is a sustainable ratio, then I think the idea that other councils that haven't should use the prudent council's balance sheet as a bailout is wrong, and I think it's unfair. And is it harder to deliver services and build infrastructure on an island compared to close to a city? Absolutely. But the disingenuous nature about not even acknowledging that FAGS grants exist, those federal assistance grants which top up some councils' budgets to the over 50% in some cases, when you take into account special purpose payments, need to be put in the mix. There are ways to help address that, and I would hope that as part of the reform process that we may have to entertain that those rates may end up higher for some of those other councils, and we may see the tide go out a little bit for us. If the trade-off for that is greater scrutiny and accountability of how that money's spent, that may be a good thing. But as I said, I'm happy to endorse this, and I'll certainly be noting it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor James.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is interesting that on page 3 of the report, it refers to Clarence City Council can remain unchanged in terms of its municipal boundaries on the basis that it's financially sustainable in its current form. And it just seems as though, and it's been identified within the report, that council wants to maintain the status quo, and the very nature of the report suggests, in my opinion, that there's no change to Clarence's boundaries. We are sustainable. We've got $1 billion asset portfolio in excess of $1 billion, and that it's all nice and homey, and it's all very pleasant to be a resident of Clarence. And as far as the rest of the place is concerned, some of these smaller councils who are struggling, they can't really meet from their ratepayer revenue base to make ends meet, and even some of the smaller rural councils are really finding it difficult to be able to sustain and also meet the demands of their ratepayers, and that's where they're going to be left behind in this whole scheme of things. It's unfortunate that Premier Rockcliffe has come out made the statement. It seems to me he's running scared. He's after trying to rejig his platform as being seen to be representing the people, and he's just plucked this thing out of the air. And notwithstanding, and I'm hoping that Sue Smith, Mr Mayor, will stand firm and not be bludgeoned by the Liberal government to be able to make an alternative recommendation when the final review is being presented. The simple fact of the matter is that, okay, we've changed it from endorse to note, but at the same time, look, and I don't want to be negative. I spoke with my colleague earlier this evening when there was the suggestion about note. Note's okay, but the embodiment in this report clearly says Clarence wants to stay as it is. It doesn't give a bull's roar about whatever happens elsewhere. And this is the basis of our community as it is today. We don't have the cohesiveness or the fortitude to be able to say, let's move ahead and so on. I'm hoping, and that I'm putting so much faith in Sue Smith's review, that she will basically back the Premier into a corner, and by the very good work that she's done and her committee have done to date, it just seems as though that Premier Rockcliffe may do another backflip. And he's got that many patches and injuries from all his other endeavours, including the stadium, to see the writing on the wall. And that is, I understand that there's a population in support of, overwhelming population in support of mergers and let's call them amalgamations, because that's the word that's been around since Adam was a boy. So look, I don't want to be negative, and look, but noting this report is just saying, Clarence, we're doing all right, and we don't need to worry about anybody else. And this is where I think the Tasmanian community is starting to fall down in its ideals of working together and being able to be one that would look towards helping other councils who aren't as financially viable and opulent perhaps in their asset base, and therefore being able to work together. I won't support it. And look, note, endorse. The report is too much in favour of Clarence and not in favour of our neighbouring councils.
I think it's important, before I go to Councillor Warren, just to make the point that while the report states that we're sticking to the status quo for now, we still have an open mind for what the future looks like, and are interested to learn what both our community and neighbouring councils think. But what is made quite clear in our submission is that we can't do anything until the board stage 3 report comes out. So I think, just to correct some of the comments you made there, Councillor James.
On a point of order, Mr Mayor, look, are you entering into the debate?
There's no point of order. Make clarification. Take your seat. Oh. So I will not be verbal. I will not have reports verbal in this place or misrepresented in presentations. I will clarify where clarifications are required. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I could echo Deputy Mayor's concern about the reform process or lack thereof. I could express my personal opinion on how we should be reforming local government. I could express cynicism that anything will actually happen in this term of minority government. I'm going to confine my comments to the motion in front of us, which is endorse or note the submission, which has already been submitted. So you can endorse it or not, it actually makes no difference. It has been submitted. And note that everyone, including the council, has the opportunity to make further representations if they have a strong feeling and so feel that they should. So I endorse this recommendation, whether it notes or endorses the submission, whatever. The submission has been made and you still have an opportunity to make comment. So I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Any other colleagues? Councillor Kennedy.
Yes, I'd just like to thank Councillor Warren for pointing that out. And as outlined there, this is stage 2. Thank you.
Any other colleagues? Councillor Hume. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
I just want to reiterate the point that was made earlier that by you that councillors have had plenty of opportunity to comment on this draft, and only a couple did so. I was hoping to take up that opportunity. I read through the report several times, and from my point of view, in terms of my values and my approach to this process, I couldn't really fault it. I think the CEO and the other staff that have contributed to this report have done an excellent job in terms of outlining the principles that should be considered in terms of when amalgamations happen. But the other aspects of this report that haven't really been discussed is also the principles that could be looked at in terms of shared services and where those opportunities for shared services might exist, what the low-hanging fruit might be. IT systems, for example, was one example that's offered, and where other services where the sharing of services may be a challenge. And we have to recognise that the work being done by the Future of Local Government Review Board is beyond amalgamations. There's a lot more in it than just amalgamations. Having said that, look, we have, as a council, put quite a bit of work during the previous process looking at amalgamations into that, including doing 2 very comprehensive studies of a couple of amalgamation processes and what the outcomes would be in terms of council's finances and local representation. I think one of the things we need to recognise is that if an amalgamation process is going to succeed, and if the government is going to say we are not going to force amalgamations, then there is a way to facilitate it. We know that it's difficult to do. It's very difficult to do because of the fact that councils are worried about losing local representation, that there is a cost to amalgamation. We know that there's a cost to aligning systems. There was a very good presentation done at the Local Government Professional Development Day, which Councillor Warren was at as well, where someone from Queensland who'd been CEO of a council that had been through 2 amalgamation processes and 1 de-amalgamation talked about some of the headaches that are involved in those processes. And he mentioned, for example, that when you have 2 EBAs, it always goes up to the highest cost one. So those costs that councils incur, if the government wants to amalgamate councils voluntarily, I think one of the things they'll need to do, and this was kind of the process that was followed back when the spate of school closures happened back in 2010. Was it 2010? It was a bit later than that, I think. Is to put some money on the table and actually incentivise that, to say, well, we recognise that there are costs, we recognise that there are infrastructure needs to help this process along. We'll set up a fund and we'll put some money there to not only incentivise council amalgamations, but to actually help cover some of those costs that we know you'll be facing. And I think if that happened, you would see not only councils amalgamate, but actually go through a process where they bring their communities with them, rather than have the pain and anguish of having a model forced upon them. Because we know some councils are too small to be sustainable, and we know they can't, some of them are struggling to meet just the basic legislative required services. And so it's something that's going to happen down the track, and I'm glad that in our submission we're saying that we're open to it in the future. But the principles that we're espousing are important to explain, what the preconditions really should be for an amalgamation to happen. So I congratulate the CEO on an excellent report, and yes, I hope we note it.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Any other colleague? Councillor Chong, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will be supporting the resolution here. I guess for me, I think it is presumptuous of us to assume that amalgamating with Clarence would automatically be better for everybody else. Right? There is nothing in anything we've seen. And I suppose the bit that resonates for me in this report, this very excellent report, is a sentence that goes, without qualified assistance to undertake a proper assessment, it is impossible to determine a preferred scenario that is conclusively sustainable and beneficial to the communities captured by the relevant scenario. If we don't have that information, if we don't know that, this is absolutely the best thing for us to say. If something in the next report comes out and says, these are the benefits, we can show how it all works, fine, we can reassess. But at the moment, this is definitely what we should be saying.
Councillor Chong, thank you. And for the benefit of colleagues, that was a point that was certainly raised on Friday with the board. Do you wish to add anything to that, Sir Yeo? Okay, all right. Thank you. Anyone else wish to make a contribution? All right. Thank you to Councillor Hunter. Right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you to all my colleagues for adding substance to the debate. It's always interesting to see where the conversation leads. And I'd like to thank Councillor Mulder for his suggestion to change the motion from endorsed to noted. Sort of 2 points that have been raised. The first one is the main motion that we're here to vote on, as Councillor Warren clearly reminded us all. But the underlying theme that we all felt we were signed up to go on this journey, there was a clear process with the local government review. And I think we all feel like the rug's been pulled out from beneath us on that. We don't know where we're headed now, but we're still on that journey. We'll wait for the third report to come out. In the meantime, we're focused with this submission and noting it. It makes sense, it's balanced, it's appropriate. I seek council support.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. I'll wait for invite Councillor Mulder to take his seat. Thank you. The motion is with that change that Council A notes as opposed to endorses. I'll put that motion up. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. So carried. Now moving on to motions on notice 9.1. There's a notice of motion from Councillor Mulder regarding council mergers. Councillor Mulder, is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor James. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mulder.
Yeah. Having listened to the previous debate, as we all will, can I just make absolutely clear this motion is not about which of the particular models we have or haven't endorsed or noted and all the rest of it. This motion arose after the first report was drafted, after our workshop discussions, and was a direct response to the Premier of this state, who had commissioned this extensive inquiry, and I would pay due respect to the work of the Honourable Sir Smith and the Director of Local Government of Matt Healy, who have been on this campaign and have spelled out unequivocally why reform is needed. But this motion is not about that. This motion is, we've all had our say, we've all had our input, and might I say, most of that input is from vested self-interest of councillors, of staff, of all those sorts of things, and that's fine, of course, with stakeholders. The principle of my motion is about it's time that we put this issue to the people. Not as a comprehensive report and all the rest of it. Not as we did in 2017, and yes, I was around at the time, when we went to the people on an amalgamation issue. But it wasn't a yes-no amalgamation issue. There were 6 alternative versions of what amalgamation could look like, and somehow or other we were supposed to get a majority opinion about which one of those people favoured. There were mixes about joining with Hobart. There were mixes about regional councils. Most of the mixes were in here now. And that came from the mayors. And then you went out to the community. Well, if you're faced with a confusing choice of 6 options, you know, the principle might be I'm in favour of amalgamations, But the options is which version of it? You're never going to get 6 options up. What you've got to do is you've got to go to the people with a simple choice as to say, do you or do you not believe in amalgamations? And not with a 80-page report outlining all the options and all the issues, but like we do with a national referendum, like we're about to do with the Voice campaign, you have simply 5 to 10 dot points for the no case and the yes case. So my motion is about the principle of taking this back to the people, to the ratepayers. And yes, the positions won't be clear. And if we move this motion, which is simply asking other councils to say, are you willing to do this? If they're not willing to do it, then we won't do it because it's pointless. And the government's made it clear. It will not happen unless the people agree. And all I can say is that, whether you're for or against it, you cannot sit here in all consciousness and vote against asking the people what they think in a logical, normal manner. And yes, such a electors poll may not occur, or certainly wouldn't occur before the end of October, when we've got the information from the report. We cannot sit here and note and make all these reports and have all our pontifications without actually going back. This is supposed to be a democracy. We are not an autocratic person, we're not supposed to be, telling other people what to think. If you ever wanted to talk about consultation, this is the sort of issue where we can go. And all I'm saying to it is, let's test the waters, let's take the government's new approach, which is saying that the community must agree to these consultations, and at least ask them. And if you don't believe in amalgamations, and if you do, and you've got all those sorts of issues, then I think you would be welcome to join the team to produce the no case or the yes case. And let's go out there and have a proper debate with the community and try to explain to them how we really can't, how we should or shouldn't do the status quo, as the previous report noted, or whether we should move forward into the 21st century. Now, I'm not arguing for or against the cases. My position on this is quite clear. However, we should ask the people.
Thank you, Councillor Moulder. Councillor Jones.
It's a very worthy motion, and rather than to go into any detail or depth of my understanding of the issue, I seek council support.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So I think Councillor Chong might have just been half a hand ahead of you then, Councillor Wong, but you'll be next. Councillor Chong, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And look, I absolutely agree we need to go and ask the community. Most definitely we do. Just not now, because what are we asking them at the moment? You've got some vague idea about, do you want to amalgamate at some point? We don't know who it will be with, or how much it will cost you, or whether it will be better for you in terms of services and facilities or any of those kind of things. So you can't make a case based on, do you think it's a good idea, but we can't tell you anything? So yes, yep, I think we should ask them, but I think we should ask our communities when we know what we're asking.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Warren, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My concerns are similar. I certainly believe in community consultation, but I also believe in giving the community the information they need to make a well-informed decision. And I'm not going to reiterate the paragraph that Councillor Chong read out in the last debate, which explains just how complex this is. And around the table, we're grappling with it. When the final report is presented and we have all that information about the actual nuts and bolts of what this will mean and financially positives and negatives, good luck with reducing that to a survey that the average constituent will feel comfortable answering. So I am concerned. The national referendum was quoted, and there's a very disturbing slogan out at the moment, which is if you don't know, vote no, instead of if you don't know, find out. And I just think that this motion, while worthy and good in principle, is too light on detail for me to feel comfortable supporting it at this stage. So while I do support seeking support from the community, it's not without providing sufficient information for the community to make an informed decision, and there's nothing about that in this motion. So I don't feel that I can support it at this stage. But, you know, maybe another motion will come back between now and when the final report is available.
Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't know if this is a question for the mover, but there was no time frame sort of specified on, and I guess this is a question to myself, really. Is this something that council should be doing, or is this something that LGAT or state government should be doing if this is the sort of elector poll that we should be undertaking? I mean, yeah, I'd love to know what people... But we're sort of narrowing it down a little bit with this. I'm just wondering if it's something that should be conducted by LGAT or state government. Question to myself, or someone else may be able to answer.
Well, Councillor Monica probably handle that in his right of reply. Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Hunter, thank you.
Mr Mayor, thanks Councillor Mulder for raising this motion, and I very much appreciate your sentiment, as many of us do, to engage with the community. We all think it's important, which you reflected here. I agree that the time isn't right yet. I would hope that we would get to that point after we have the details of the Stage 3 report. At the moment, if we go out there without information, as you say, what are we asking? It's just basically what we've submitted to the state government. Of we don't have enough information to give you a clear answer, so we'll sort of opt for where we're at the moment. But I would definitely be open to this in the future, but also have the same question: is this a matter for council to do, or is it a state government or LGAT matter? So I won't be supporting this motion at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Walker, thank you.
Yes. So the cost saltation of doing elector polls got to be around 100 grand. So you're going to spend some treasure. Make sure you get questions right. Make sure you know the settings you're in. Try and extract some value from it. And along with value, you should probably be trying to put in some choice, not just curate scenarios that you think is best. What have people that have raised the issue of mergers with me mainly suggested that this large urban council be doing in the merger front? It's consolidating with other city councils. That is the general fulcrum of view when this topic is raised with me. If it was about my own little ideological frolic, then I would certainly be saying that Brighton shouldn't just be included, it should be the number one option. There's many reasons for that. It's not just that we both have major transport hubs. It's not just that we have strong communities of interest. You know, we also we are looking at a school like Lindisfarne North. It is the in-area school for Old Beach, as is Rose Bay, the in-area school for high school. Now, that is not the case with any of the other councils. There's not that connection. And you know, I could go on about that, but no, that one's put to the side. So this process needs to be done in depth. If you were to actually look at the other councils that are being talked about here, Sorell is actually the capital of those councils as far as communities raging up to Swansea and down from Tasman go for accessing health services, for accessing shopping and other things, then it's there. And so again, maybe some consolidation there with some some adjustments to FAS grants makes more sense. But you know, it's interesting because I'm getting told through the previous thing, and I'll quote the mover, that yes, it will be a detriment to our particular ratepayers. So that is, I don't think it's a misrepresentation, and the mover has the opportunity to, in his right to reply somewhere I've got that wrong. That is saying a cross-subsidisation of Clarence ratepayers to someone else. That's I don't see how you can read that anyway, any other way than that. So they're things to bear in mind. And I'm sure I'm not confabulating around people campaigning saying rates are too high in the city of Clarence in previous elections. I'm sure I'm not confabulating around that. And my memory is clear, and I'm most certainly not confabulating around people refusing budgets because they're too much, even though that what this process would do would be put upward pressure on rates for Clarence. So my memory is fantastic.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, echoing similar concerns to other colleagues, I can't support this motion. As Councillor Chong said, it is premature. One of the things that I referred in the earlier debate to the presentation that was given at the Local Government Professional Development Day by Brett de Chastel. And one of the things he said about amalgamations is you have to avoid trying to have a solution looking for a problem. You define the problem first. And it has been generally defined in vague terms in the local government review that, yes, there are some councils that, because their size may not be sustainable, that are struggling to meet their legislative requirements to deliver basic services. But I haven't seen it specified which councils. And I haven't seen any specifics about our neighbouring councils and what services they may be struggling to deliver and what they may be struggling to deliver them. Now, if it's the case, I would like to see some specifics. I would like to see the problem defined first before we start looking at specific amalgamation proposals to solve those problems. And then if we can put some definition around that, and perhaps the future local government review Stage 3 report will do that, that's yet to be seen, that we can then start looking at going out to broader consultation with the community about what the way forward is. But I just don't believe that there's a case for holding all these expensive elector polls to try and see, what model people prefer to solve a problem that hasn't been defined.
Councillor Darko, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just concurring with colleagues here, we really do need to ensure that we can give the public enough data to make a properly informed vote on this matter. And yes, we don't yet have a time frame on when this would be moved, but we still don't know whether amalgamations are going to be the answer. Maybe it's going to be some border adjustments. Maybe it needs to be redrawn from scratch. Do we have the data for all of that? Not yet. I do have some concerns with some of the language in the explanatory notes, which, as a progressive, feels like it leans a bit too neoliberal for my liking. But that said, there should be a public vote on what the future councils should look like. I don't feel that we yet have the data to be the one making the case, to know whether we should be making a case, and so I would like to see this discussed at a later time.
Thanks, Councillor Darko. Any other colleagues wish to make a contribution? Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I actually did take the time to speak with Councillor Mulder earlier today in respect of this motion, and we did talk about issues around timeframes and timing of such a motion. I think that what I'm feeling is that there is a strong interest from colleagues to test the waters with the community. As Councillor Mulder said, go out to the public. I don't think anyone's opposed to the principle of that. I think that this motion is actually about potentially going out to the public. And maybe some people have some issue with that, because essentially what the motion is saying is let's go and talk to these other councils and see whether they want to actually have any interest in amalgamating with us before we then go and test the waters and spend the money to consult with our community. So it's actually not about definitely going out to the public. This is actually about possibly going out to the public at some point depending on what the response from these particular councils may be. Perhaps with some tweaking around timing, that this might have been more palatable to colleagues. I think that might have been the case. I would have liked to see some wording around after the final report is handed down. I do commend Councillor Mulder for bringing this forward. I think that it's in the right spirit, and I have no doubt that we'll see something of this ilk come back to the council very soon. But at the moment, I can't support it quite in its form.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Mulder, one reply, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Anyone would think that I'd put up a motion that says that council conducts an electoral poll on the questions of amalgamation. I didn't do that at all. I'm simply going back to the fact that the Premier has pulled the rug on compulsory or forced mergers, which this is all about. And in saying so, he said there will be no mergers unless the community agrees. And I agree. In there, I didn't get what I would have liked to have heard, that the state government will conduct a community-wide survey to ask the people what they thought. No, 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 no. We are going to pander to these small councils, and we've seen the dramas that have occurred. We've seen the problems about inside the Conservative Neoliberal Party, of which I am no longer a member. I don't belong to any club that would have me as a member. But that is what they were doing. What I'm saying is let's reach out. Sure, the electors, I'm not asking for an electors poll today. I'm just asking to get them the sense that, particularly Sorrel, who have made plenty of indications that they are interested, to say that following the Premier's new model, you can just forget the Future of Local Government report. They've just trashed that. We're saying let's go to these, let's at least make the approaches to these other councils. If they're interested in holding the electors poll, then it would come back to this council, and no doubt there'd be a lot of talk between the two councils about what that question would be and what the yes and the no case would be. I'm only laying the foundation for the way forward. I would like it to go through LGAT, I would like it to go through everything else, but the Premier's made it absolutely clear that they are going to pander to their neoliberal constituency and not engage in this unless councils like us stand up, show some leadership and go out to the community and consult the community. Be ye for or be ye against it is not the point now. We've all had our says. The government's made it clear it won't happen until the community have its say, and so it should be. And all this motion does is lay some groundwork for that to occur. I would have no interest in going to an electors poll until the Stage 3 report came out, and we could then build the yes and the no case. And asking me for more details at this preliminary stage is just setting myself up for something that the neoliberals are doing right now with the voice referendum.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. So the motion is the Clarence Council seeks the support of Sorrel, Tasman and Morgan Spring Bay councils in conducting electoral polls on merging all or some of the said councils. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? That one's lost. Now, moving now on to item 10, Councillors' questions time. The question 10.1, there's no questions on notice, nor are there any answers to questions on notice. 10.3, answers to questions without notice, previous council meeting, as listed in the agenda. Moving on to 10.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the floor, starting this evening with Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie? Put you on the spot there.
Yeah, thank you. Caught me on the hop. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a quick one, and it does probably tie into something that was mentioned earlier in this evening's meeting around footpaths. And I noticed on the East Irwin Highway we have quite a number of power poles or Telstra poles that are right in the middle of the footpath. So I've actually gone and taken some photographs. I've had some constituent inquiries about this, because there are actually some sections where the middle of the footpath actually has a pole through it. So you actually can't go if you're in, you have any type of disability, or you have a mobility issue and you're required to have a chair or a scooter. Even actually physically walking it, you have to go around. It's very narrow. So the question is, is council aware of this situation, and is it anywhere on the list of council's footpath replacement maintenance schedule?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Mr Graham.
Mr Mayor, we certainly know of the infrastructure being there. It is our responsibility under the Roads and Jetty Act that we're responsible for the footpath. We are looking at, in the longer term, replacing some of the bitumen footpath with concrete, but removing or moving services would be extremely expensive, but we would look at that time. No plans, certainly this financial year, to undertake that body of work.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Thank you. Councillor Mulder.
Mayor, I have two questions. The first one I alluded to during the debate, but it wasn't answered then, so maybe I shall ask it more formally now. In regard to the $1 million headwork charge for the Pass Road development, could I have some idea about how that is calculated on a per block or per resident status, because that would indicate the amount of cars that will be using it? And that, in comparison, for what I've been informed, is the $8,000 per lot headworks charge that we levied on School Road.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Mr Graham, are you in a position to answer that, please?
Through Mr. I'll take that on notice on the actual workings which we can provide. Certainly School Road was done in terms of looking at the stage development that would occur through there and contributing a certain responsibility of the developers to the usage of that road. The $1 million for the Pass Road has already been paid to council, and that was part of the permit conditions. I think is that 2012 or 2011 was part of the permit conditions for that. But we'll come back to council through a briefing report in terms of how the workings of that was undertaken at that time.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Mulder.
Supplementary, which is a point of clarification, which no doubt will be taken on notice, but I'm just quickly going through the report here. It's actually, there's two stages. The $1 million for the first part is accepted, but your actual report on page 20 said it is likely a similar headworks requirement will apply to the subdivision permit at 163 Pass Road if granted. So is that $2 million?
Thank you, Ms Olsen.
That particular sentence was actually removed from the council report prior to the meeting. An error.
Yeah, I think that was advised on Friday, and it was removed from the website as well.
I think that was another case of me being late, I recall. It was under.
I think it was. Yeah, and I apologise that wasn't put out to.
I'd rather you didn't verbally.
Thank you, Councillor.
Verbal is saying something you didn't say. My second question relates to the shoreline, to the junction, the traffic lights at the junction of Shoreline Road and at Shoreline Drive, Clarence Street and Howrah Road. By way of context, this council about 3 years ago either moved a motion under Councillor Edmonds to arrange for traffic signals. About 2 years ago, we were advised that had qualified under the Black Spot program. And today, again, I was nearly ahead on because I couldn't see cars coming through that intersection. Could I please be advised of what progress is being made on a road that qualifies as a black spot, hence it's a danger? Are we sitting on our hands? When is this situation going to be resolved?
Thank you, Mr Graham.
Through Mr Mayor, I'll take that one on notice and inform councillors.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Yes. Two questions tonight. The first one is just seeking an update on the negotiations regarding Skylands. I know meetings were meant to happen. Just have any occurred yet? And if not, are there some scheduled?
Thank you, CEO.
Ms Olsen.
Ms Olsen, thank you.
Through you, Mayor, I can confirm that we have had the very beginnings of a meeting. We're just trying to clarify all of the issues that need to be negotiated. So at the very beginning of our negotiation process.
Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you. My second question is about traffic assessments in the development application process. So looking back at a traffic assessment that was undertaken for the 22-lot subdivision occurring on Bayview Road, I think it's 145 or 147, in that I learned you can't account for any other future developments that are being planned unless a DA has actually been submitted. That was news to me. So knowing how traffic assessments can be undertaken a year or two before the actual DA goes in, other plans might be underway in that time frame. And my concern is there a gap there when a DA might be lodged when there's other subdivisions being planned, but the traffic can't be assessed or accounted for yet when that DA is lodged?
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Mr Graham or Ms Olsen? Or we'll take that on notice and provide a detailed response?
We'll take that one on notice. We're debating on that one ourselves at the moment. But I think the answer is yes, there could be a delay in terms of outcomes because they're happening in a staged process and it depends when they fall at that time. But we'll further advise Council.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question. Are we planning at some time in the future to have an update to our website where residents and ratepayers have their own online profiles that they can log into and through which we can have consultation processes where we know for certain that the people responding, if they're residents and ratepayers and where they live?
CEO.
I'm going to take that one on notice as well, thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Hume? Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Excuse me. I refer to the Alderman's statement of expectations and the issues resolution procedures adopted by this council and how it applies to conduct and behaviour towards each other, council employees and community members. In the event of a complaint is made against our mayor, would he have to step aside from the implementation of the issues resolution procedures?
Take that one notice, we're coming for detailed response. Councillor James.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
No, I've got another question.
Sorry, my apologies.
Yes.
Usually you sort of telegraph you've got two punches, but your second one, please.
Sort of caught you. Yeah. The current situation into the lease arrangement on Rosny Hill, how far are we advanced in relation to that?
Thank you, CEO.
Thank you for the question. We are working on some drafting at the moment. I received an update just today, and once that has been finalised through legal review, we'll bring it to a workshop, and I'd anticipate that would be in the next couple of months.
Entry, is it intended that there would be a substantial change in the monetary value associated with the sublease?
That'll form part of the briefing. Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Walker.
Yes, so through the course of my time on council, there's been investment put into the Clarence Aquatic Centre. Sometimes that's quite a lumpy process. In light of where Glenorchy City Council finds itself, I'm just wondering if you can telegraph if we're in for any very significant upgrades or anticipated for the swimming pool within the next 5 years.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. In fact, the CEO and I had a similar conversation just last week. So,
It's probably a question that we might need to take on notice from a facilities point of view, unless Mr Graham has more knowledge than I do.
Mr Mayor, we certainly can take that on notice and sort of anticipate what's coming in the next year or two. But certainly our team is certainly planning to come to Council with a budget submission for sort of a life cycle analysis on the current facility in the coming year or two, so we can fully inform Council on the likely future of this significant facility for the municipality.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Councillor, thank you. Councillor Goyne.
I have two questions, or a one-part, two-part question. On the 15th of September, Council is planning on having a cultural awareness training delivered through Reconciliation Tasmania. Could I ask what cost that is to the ratepayers?
Thank you. Ms Coburn, are you able to...
Through Mr Mayor, I believe that's run by a volunteer from Reconciliation Tasmania, so there's no cost to council. I'll confirm that though, just to make sure.
And the second part of that question, as there's over 61,000 residents of Clarence and only just over 2,000 of those are recognised Indigenous, are we planning on having any cultural awareness to do with the other cultures that reside within Clarence?
CEO.
I'll take that on notice.
Councillor Darko. Thank you. Councillor Warren.
Mr Mayor, yesterday I became aware of a family in Gordons Hill Road that have been suffering racial vilification and vandalism for 2 years, have been unable to get any assistance from police. They weren't able to provide evidence of who was doing the vandalism. So my question is there anything that council can do to help? Because this family has had to spend considerable time and money in removing graffiti from their driveway, and I know we have a graffiti team. I just wondered if there's any way that we can provide support to this family, because this should not be happening in a civilised society, and anything we can do to make that family feel that not everybody in the world is against them would be a good thing to do. So,
Councillor Warren, thank you for your question. The family wrote to me about a week ago with some photographs of what you've just described. As soon as we became, I think it was a Sunday night, that came into me. Monday morning, first thing, we were engaging with Inspector Keen's office. Our records, and correct me if I'm incorrect here, but my understanding is we didn't have any record here because they've been engaging with the police. The response from Tas Police has been very good, and from a community liaison perspective, but and I've written back to the family, and obviously that sort of behaviour is not tolerated here in Clarence at all. We're an inclusive community, as you quite rightly say. We have zero tolerance for that sort of behaviour. We're working closely with the police, but unless there's someone's caught in the act, there's not much that the police are able to do. But the CEO might want to add something more to my answer, but I hope we are aware of it and we're doing all that we can, and Tas Police are genuinely committed to protecting this family as well and letting them know that they are welcome. Everyone is welcome here in Clarence. CEO, do you wish to add anything else?
Thank you, Mayor. That aligns with what my understanding was. But I can advise that the police reached out late last week and were seeking to meet with the family to speak with them more directly, and I haven't had an update since last week.
If I can just clarify, that's really good to hear, but my question was, is there anything that council can do in assisting with the removal of the graffiti and the damage?
I'll need to take that on notice and understand, make some inquiries to see what we can do.
Thank you. Just a second question, Councillor Warren. Okay, Councillor Chong.
That's very banal after that one. But do we have any update on stadiums, Tasmania, and where that's going? Still.
We had one meeting with the chairman, Mr Michael Maloof AM, when he was first appointed. Before he had a board. Yeah. Now he has a board, and we get to meet with him. But when that does happen, I'll certainly keep colleagues informed and the community as well. Councillor Kennedy.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr Mayor. And this is a question, I think, more for public record than anything else. through you to the appropriate area, can we have an explanation as to why Harmony Market has ceased operating at the moment?
Thank you. CEO, you or Ms Olsen, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, the Harmony Market was provided with a permit in 2019. Since that time, that permit has expired. We've been contacted by Harmony in order to extend that permit, but unfortunately it's so far expired, it's not able to be extended. We're yet to receive an application for a new permit.
Thank you for that. And can I ask also, do we have any other markets operating in our city that might be in a similar situation?
Ms Olsen?
Through you, Mayor, I believe there may be markets in that situation that are yet to come to our attention. I think there may be an issue with the Kangaroo Bay market, but I don't have the detail on that at this point in time.
Thank you, Ms Olsen. Sarah, would you like to contribute?
Yes, I can clarify on that. The Kangaroo Bay market has, the produce market, has a DA to operate from Kangaroo Bay. They've been discussing for some time now a relocation to the boardwalk. Those negotiations are ongoing and haven't been able to be successfully resolved. There are a range of issues that keep being raised by the market operator, and I've been updating the Mayor on that.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of our questions without notice. I'll call for a motion to move into closed meeting, please. Moved by Councillor Chong, seconded by Councillor Kennedy. All those in favour? Thank you. Well, to those members of the public who've attended this evening in person, those joining us via the live stream, thank you for your company. Look forward to seeing you again, same time, same place in 3 weeks' time, and we'll say good night for now as we move into closed meeting. Thank you. Please end the feed.